Okay, welcome back to episode something or other of our coaching call with Fletch. Fletch is currently in a basement somewhere, I think, in a locker room. Anyway, how are things going with you?
Yeah, so far so good. They're feeding me twice a day. They're quite kind.
The unglamorous side of coaching is that you're sitting in a locker.
Basically, like a glorified changing room now.
Yeah, very good. Well, we're back off. I was away last week, and we'll touch on that. I think because there was some excitement, or not, as the case may be, and then dig into this into the training program. Maybe I'll admit to the accident of last week, and then we can maybe talk about how we plan or not plan on those kind of abnormal weeks as we're running through. So yeah, so I was skiing last week in France and was obviously very careful and spending lots of time to avoid falling over, except the first day when I walked on some ice and swiftly fell onto my backside and caused quite a significant, thud. No major damage, although there was a bit of bruising and soreness, which carried me through the week. So that was I guess a week or 10 days ago now. So yes, that was my admission that I had to tell Fletch about. And ironically, I'd spent my entire week, obviously after that, but as well, being very careful with the actual skiing, minimize actually only skiing for kind of half days. And whenever the kids disappeared off the piste along the edges, I was dutifully staying on the piste, carefully waiting, not trying to test anything out. And yeah, so I felt it was a bit unjustified. But anyway, ice is ice, and 2 meters. I'm not designed for ice skating.
Yeah, the physics of that being top heavy and the base and so on.
Gravity was my enemy.
That's it exactly.
Yeah. So I think we were going to one thing we were going to answer is kind of how to deal with those abnormal weeks, because we're not professional athletes. We're not full time this. We've got lives and other things to fit into. So how do we go about it? I can talk through what I did, but maybe you give a sort of coaching perspective for how we handle those not normal weeks.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the current ethos around training is like, if there's no plan, there's nothing happening. And when you're dealing with real life, sometimes a plan actually puts more spanners in the works than it does facilitate training. When chaos is high, like getting to and from a different country, kids being on piece, schedules, different environments, there's so many things to consider. Actually, the best person to make those decisions is the athlete. And so being a little bit off-piste, all puns intended, around the training plan is that hopefully by that point, we've given you enough tools to work with. Be like, cool, interval training, probably not going to be a focus this time because we've got altitude, we've got high volume weeks, we've got a lot of chaotic environments, we've also got some slips and trip hazards. So there's so many things that could potentially go wrong that as a coach, being in that environment is impossible. So the next best person to be making those decisions who's in the environment is the athlete. And so a lot of people do worry when there's no sessions in the diary, but I think that's kind of giving it a little bit of a testing rein for yourself, being actually, I know what I'm doing, I know how my body feels, and I get the ethos around what we're trying to achieve here. And we talked about before you left anyway, be like, you've got a ton of volume going on at altitude, and we're just going to see how you feel, because it could be that there's a really hard day of skiing and then the following day is almost off. Or it could be a complete whiteout for like 2 days. We don't know. So I think this is where a lot of people do sometimes freak out. Is like, there's no plan. I don't know what to follow. Trust your instincts. Look at what's happened previously. Look at all the information. And if all else fails, that's when you ask.
Yeah, and I think actually this time round, I guess the one thing perhaps I carried into it that I hadn't perhaps in the past, or not quite so consciously in the past, was recovery, right? So I drove out. So that was kind of 2 days really of driving on and off with a breakdown, a van breakdown, and a 7-hour trip to get to the tunnel. That was, the first plan was a disaster, right? As in, we're meant to get there quickly, took nearly twice as long. So any plan I had was kind of was in tatters on day one. So, but the thing I did do is I took the time to say, you know what? I don't need to do a load today, and actually think about being recovered from the kind of, I guess, the non-training side, i.e. the travel and things. Um, and so I took the foot off on Monday or Sunday rather, and then it was kind of, apply myself, and not, and I think the other piece was like I couldn't do intervals. Well, I suppose I could have done intervals, but it was pretty fruitless. And so it was kind of, work on volume, work on stuff, but also not just do the same thing every day and sort of fatigue through the week. It was like, be consciously doing a run this day, be consciously skinning up the mountain this day for a longer session, and mix it up. And like, yeah, and I had to adjust as well with the fact that I'd gone base over bayonet on the ice as well. But it was actually different. I've been there before and had a similar plan in inverted commas, but this time was different. And actually, the end result was on the Friday. I remember distinctly in the past always wanting to do a big run on the last day and basically just being too tired to do it. Whereas this time I was able to do. I just made up a run of basically 4K down the mountain, 4K back, 3K down, 3K back, 2K down, 2K back, one, which goes to 20K. And so that it was a sort of target at the beginning of the week with a rough aim, but it meant that by the end of the week, actually, I was able to do it. And so I left the week thinking, I've done this task rather than not quite made it or not quite recovered or not quite whatever. And that was a result of taking taking my foot off the gas the day before to be able to deliver that thing. And I think my mentality before would have certainly been what you alluded to, which was much more just go, do something every day, just do something every day. And I still was doing stuff every day, but just, I just dialed back that particular volume. And as a result, I left the week feeling that Friday session like I finished on a high rather than just petering out with fatigue and all the rest of it. So it's a long way of saying, I think I'm learning.
The best demonstration of learning is description. So we got a good way of going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think exactly that. It's about learning. It's about knowing how your body works and putting those things into practice. Only actually happens when there is no structure. You have to kind of implement it on your own. And without it being about, well, it is, as a coach, what we're basically trying to do is outdo ourselves as from a job, because we can't be in your pocket every second, although we've kind of solved part of that problem.
Yeah.
Like, especially on the long runs and stuff, you can dial in and we can coach you through that now. But every day, every choice you make and so on, that's in your own head. And therefore, we have to just give you tools to use. And those tools get brought out when they're needed. And the bigger your toolbox, the more things you can apply.
And at the end of the day, that's what you rely on when you're racing, right? You're not, bad water, you'll be there, but you're not in my actual head. You're only able to take in what I can give you in terms of feedback. And so as you go on these long runs, that the amount of information you can actually communicate is limited. Any coach or any advice is only going to be a portion of what you've done. Yeah, I think that's.
However good technology gets, I have a strange feeling I don't want to be in your head.
No, you definitely don't want to be in there. Yeah, do not plug in under under no circumstances do you want to be inside my head halfway through an ultra, or even any part through the ultra. Maybe join me for the last mile. But no more of it. So after my little tumble and my week-long, relatively painful week, I think, I've just been for an osteo appointment and had some treatment. So we now have a plan to kind of get back into it. But the conclusion was overuse. So falling on my backside and then skinning up the mountain, running up mountains, skiing was just too much load on my glutes. And so I just kind of picked up a bit of stress on those. So we're into this week.
But just to jump on that slightly, is like, I would much rather that be the case than what could have potentially happened, like, historically speaking. Like, that first fall would have put you on your back for 3 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And actually it's definitely worth reiterating, like, since the kind of new approach to my back and exercises, there's no way I would have got driving to France and driving back without some kind of episode, like some kind of back-based episode. And it was a lot of load, and skiing and all that sort of different movement and stuff was definitely a lot of load. But I touch wood, I've come out of it without that proper big problem, if that's the right word. And so that's definitely progress on that front.
Good. Your glutes are finally working, and they're working too much.
So definitely. It was comedy. I couldn't even stand on like putting a sock on. I couldn't stand on one leg. It was like, nah. Um, so yeah. Anyway, so we're back. So we took it. I went out this morning and just pulled out the session. I was like, I can't. This is not gonna work. Then I've been to osteo, had some treatment, and now we're looking at what to do for the rest of the week. So probably, I think if you pull up the old plan.
There we go. The caveat to the current state of the plan is that I found out that you did this little tumble and had all these problems yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was checking what state I was in before I had to admit.
It's like I've dumped my car in a ditch. How bad is it before I've got to call my parents?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the intervals this morning was a bit of a tester to see how things were going, but rightly so, pulled out because it's like I said before, there's no fruit to be had on that. The benefits are completely squashed by the downside. So something to bear in mind in there. It might be still worth looking into the strength side of things if you do get a chance to get into the gym. Probably to like tomorrow, looking at just purely leg extension, getting the quads working, calf raises, the isometric calf raises, getting the lower leg still doing some work without having to then focus on the glute especially. But yeah, rest and recovery for at least a couple of days, like the osteo suggested, is going to be good. Going into a relatively easy, relaxed 10K on Friday, but that's a bandwidth that we're going to hopefully have, which is like, look, anywhere between 5 and 10. Just get going, reassess how things are progressing. If they're feeling pretty good, great. We can then go into the longer run this weekend, which is a bit of pace practice. So we're looking at 8K at race pace, which we are thinking race pace is kind of like sub 3 marathon kind of pace is kind of what we're thinking. It's getting
We
more
just
refined and
caveat
more
that
groove.
that is not bad water race pace.
No, that is not bad water race pace. That is, although who knows, one day. Um, it's a stimulus pace. So I'll rephrase it. Is we're looking for a stimulus pace. So hard aerobic speed work that we probably could do for almost an entire marathon, but we're just going to break it up into little chunks, become more efficient there, become more routinely proficient at it, because there is going to be a marathon to do in the plan. And the better we perform in the marathon, those progressions and that development pays off in the longer runs too. So the faster we can make our marathon now, technically the more we can string that out and go further into the ultra. Also playing around with the progressions that we were doing previously, sticking with the ethos of its targeted paces, but we're kind of going over and under. So we're not having those middle ground ones anymore, the 430s, the 445s. It's can we hit the 415 that we're kind of finishing up on, boom, back down to sort of steady pace of 5, back up, back down, undulating between the two. And then on the longer run on the Sunday, just simple, relatively relaxed, pulling it down to 5:30 pace, 20K in the bank. All the quality's been done the previous day. This is purely just about ticking some miles off. And then that kind of leads us into the following week where Monday's becoming our recovery, going into then the usual routine that we're kind of thinking of, which is some special blocks of Thursday, easy 10 first thing, if we can get it in there, followed by a threshold session. Joining those two things together really helps to get volume into the legs and protects the recovery day on the following day. With then we're starting to ramp up the strength work. We'll start to add some more bits into there. In mind how the butt bounces back.
Didn't bounce. That was the trouble.
So yeah, that's kind of we're looking for. The weekend is kind of like massively caveated based on how Friday goes. If Friday's
exactly.
a washout, we like there's no point. Then we'll just really pull back on the intensity of the longer run on Saturday, or flip them around, and we'll just do them in reverse. See how things play out.
Yeah. Well, it sounds good. I think we'll let's say take it easy. Day tomorrow, and then Friday, and see how we go. And I felt like yesterday's run, which was a sort of 9K at 4:30, like I felt it, but I was okay. You know, it was afterwards. It was interesting actually. It was, I'd say interesting, relatively interesting. I felt it quite hard afterwards. Like I was quite sore afterwards, but it very quickly dissipated. Yeah, it was a very
Right.
kind of, which was reassuring in a way because I was like, oh, but that really is pretty painful. But then probably an hour later, it would drop right down again.
Okay.
Whereas, you know, I guess if it was a more severe or sort of more severe underlying kind of injury, territory that you just don't get that. Doesn't dissipate so quickly.
Yeah.
That was relatively reassuring. Good stuff. Well, I think that's it probably for this week. And I'll stay on terra firma, no ice, no. Oh, I just wanted to give you something to stress about, really.
I'm going grey as it is. I don't need any more stress.
Yeah,
I
very
think the
good.
biggest part is like when it comes to
Yeah.
a lot of people's journeys with these long distance races and even just the 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons, running in general is such a fine balance between stimulus and recovery and life and other sports that you want to dabble in and play on. Things like this are going to come along. It could have been that you tripped off a curb and twisted your ankle. It could be that you got bumped into riding your bike. There's so many things that could happen that actually this is just the same protocol would be if you twisted your ankle on a run versus got hit by a car. It's a reassess how you're getting on, what's the pain level like, and how much time do we need to bounce back for before we then can reload you again. If this was like a week before bad water, I probably would come around and kill you myself. Thankfully, we've got quite a few weeks to go. So
I can guarantee there'll be no ice involved in the weeks leading up to Badwater. But it's a challenge, right? You do all this training and you do all these things, and at the end of the day, A, accidents happen, but B, you can't control everything, and you've just got to have it. I had it 2 years ago before Novacoli, like the week leading up to it. I couldn't walk. I couldn't run. On the Monday before I was flying out on the Thursday, my back had gone. I went out to run and I couldn't do a kilometer, and holding your nerve in that kind of situation is something.
definitely.
So we'll stay safe. But it's all the other bit that I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago, but is actually to be confident that how slowly fitness fades away, as in, taking that extra day or taking those extra few days or whatever it might be. Okay, you don't want to keep doing that because obviously then net you're just not training. But if something does happen, like missing a day to recover it's not like, oh my God, suddenly your VO2 is going to fall through the floor and everything unravels really, really quickly. It's better to, I think, what's the phrase, kind of recover well, recover once, rather than rushing back and then not being able to train properly.
100%, 100%. We've in that talk that we did together, there are so many ways people excuse overtraining, and one of them has been like, "Oh, I'll just go and do a recovery run quickly." No, because that's not going to enhance your recovery. In fact, actually, it probably is going to delay your recovery. Just chill out, give it some time, 2 or 3 days. Like, you're not going to lose anything. Okay, if it was 2 or 3 months and you hadn't done anything, cool, man, it's a different conversation. I think it was like they did a bedridden research paper, and it was, I think, if they retained 20% of their total weekly volume for it retained VO2 max and all the other things for like a month. So it does not drop off anywhere near as quick as people feel like it does. But that, I think that's also the way it feels versus actually what's happening is two different things. Yeah, it's quite interesting, the psychology of once people get into a rhythm, once people get into a habit and get into a routine, it's so hard to shake off that actually it starts to undo some of the recovery time.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think we spoke about that before, and just being confident to just pause, don't rush into it, because in the end, when you look back at your year or your 6 months or your two, whatever, you want consistency over the long term. That's not the same as stop start in a week. You need that big volume over time, and that comes from recovering when you need to, and that's what I will now do. And I will be good.
Love it. Love it.
Good stuff. All right. Well, I will catch up with you in a couple of weeks' time. Well, I'll catch up
Sounds
with you
great.
more, but on our viral podcast in a couple of weeks' time.
See you later.
Cheers.